Yeah. Welcome, everybody. This is the work session for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for January 25th, 2022. We're calling this meeting to order. I'm going to start out by calling the roll. Alderman Barnhill.
Present.
Vice Mayor Blanton. Here. Alderman Hanson.
Here.
Alderman Peterson.
Here.
Alderman Berger.
Here.
Alderman Brown.
Present.
Alderman Potts.
Present.
And Alderman Baggett.
Present.
Everybody's here, including myself. Next is an opportunity for citizens to make comments on items that are not on the agenda. Tonight I have a speaker card from Tony Russo and Dominic Romano. The floor is yours for 2 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and aldermen and women. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you this evening. My name is Tony Russo, and this is Dominic Romano. We represent Crawford, Murphy, and Tilley. We're a civil engineering firm, and we have been in the area for about 4 years. Haven't been down here to introduce ourselves, so we simply are trying to get our name out there and get to know some more folks in the area. Got to meet Matt a few minutes ago, and just wanted to do that this evening, and thank you for allowing us to.
I'm going to leave a few business cards. We gave you a little bit of literature. Like Tony said, we're full service, civil, environmental type engineering firm. Looking forward to learning more about what's happening here in the city and maybe an opportunity to work with y'all. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, the next item is amendment number 2 to City of Franklin Contract 2019-0091, a professional services agreement with CDM Smith for the Robinson Lake Dam rehabilitation at a cost increase not to exceed $126,950.
So there was some additional work required, and we're going to talk about that, but we're also going to update you on the progress thus far with this project. So Paul will
So
provide that.
prior to bidding the project, obviously, we let that emergency contract to drain the lake. But we have to go back and update our existing survey to reflect that prior to bidding. So we had to do that work. We also had to do some widening of the dam crest. For safety reasons, on further analysis, we decided to widen it so that it wasn't a 3-to-1 slope right off the edges. It'd be unsafe if, kids were out there biking, and that resulted in a few changes. And then also we added a boat dock and a ramp to the design of it, and so this additional fee covers that. And we're hoping to be able to get this project moving to bid over the next 6 to 8 months. Happy to answer any questions. And then on the emergency breach, back in July, that was when we realized there was a breach in it. And I was really proud of our team. We put together an emergency contract. We're able to drain the lake between July and September of 2021. That final cost was $236,000. Civil constructors did it for us. They did an amazing job. They were very responsive, and we got it done very quickly.
Go ahead, Alderman Blanton.
So I know we tried
Vice
to
Mayor.
find homes for all of our fish friends. What's the plans for restocking that?
We're going to work with TWRA to restock it after the project is complete. We are building with the project some habitat for the different fish species out there, and so that'll come at the completion of the job, and we'll work directly with TWRA to do that.
I know we talked about Ronald Crutcher, and there used to be a valve that he used to use to turn off and on that dam, and you said that it was broken or corroded. How do we repair or circumvent that
We never
archaic? You didn't find
we
it?
never found a valve or anything if it existed.
Oh, I thought Jonathan or somebody told me they found it and it was broken.
We found a valve cover. If it was there, it's no longer there, is what I would tell you.
You may want to get Ronald Crutcher to go out to the property and walk it with you.
Yeah.
Because as a young boy, he used to be out there and he talked about how they would circumvent the problems that we had, so.
And we are putting an outlet structure in that can drain the lake.
Awesome.
And these are ones they use on mega lakes, so it's,
The new updated version.
yes, a new
Understood.
updated version, so it'll be well done.
Go ahead, Alderman Barnhill.
What are the plans for, I know, and I bring this up because we got something else coming up. What are the plans for algae control and that sort of thing on this lake? Do we have that?
It's got a really, really large and elaborate outlet control structure that, again, we can raise and lower the lake level with. And it also has an emergency spillway that can handle the 100-year event should something clog or become a problem. It still has a means to flood
So you
route
don't- So you don't
appropriately.
anticipate an algae problem on that lake then?
No, I don't. We're deep, we're going to dredge the lake, so we're going to dig a good chunk of it out. Up towards the wetland, it's really shallow up there. Where the tributaries come together, it's really shallow and will remain shallow. So you may see it up near the wetland areas, but the large majority of that lake is getting dug out to 6, 7, 8 foot deep and should not have the algae problems it has today.
Everybody good? Item 2, consideration of Amendment 1 to City of Franklin Contract Number 2017-0034, local agency project agreement with the Tennessee Department of Transportation for McEwen Drive from east of Cool Springs Boulevard, Oxford Glen Drive to State Route 252 Wilson Pike, TDOT PIN 125-418.00, to replace Exhibit A and to extend the project completion deadline.
So Jonathan wrote a very long memo for something that can be explained very quickly is we're getting another $12.4 million, that's a good thing, through the MPO for a total of $22.4 million of federal funding on this project. It's a contract requirement between us and TDOT to extend the date so that we can get reimbursed. So hoping to do this once, we pushed that date to January 2024. And, you know, right now, the project's moving good. We're essentially turning every remaining track over to condemnation and go through that condemnation process. There's one track remaining that we have to make an offer on, where we had to update some appraisals. And so we've gotten all the offers out except for that one. And by the end of the month, you know, every track that can't be settled will be going through that condemnation process. And just because we say condemnation doesn't mean we didn't settle. A lot of times we can't get a bank to release a lien on the property, and therefore we're forced to do a condemnation on it, even though we've agreed with the property owner. So there's those random issues like that force us into that condemnation process. But we're doing great. We're moving forward. As soon as we get that into the condemnation, we can start through the final design approval through TDOT, which has been completed for some time now.
Go ahead, Alderman Berger.
Okay, you don't have to pick me up off the floor because somebody fell off on the floor at home when I read this earlier. And I'm like, oh, gosh, yeah, I know. So what does that date of January 2024 actually mean? What do we do on 2024? I mean, we're
That's our deadline to have a notice to proceed for construction with TDOT,
To start the project.
to start the project.
Before bid, after bid?
We have to get the note before bid. We have to have that notice to proceed to construction. That's our deadline to get that. Now, we're hoping to get that sooner, but we put that date out so we don't have to amend this contract again and again if we miss an aggressive deadline. But it's being moved as fast as we possibly can.
Okay, so in different language, people listening at home, in my district, are going to ask me about this again. And you give them A, B, C, why? Why are we doing this again?
This is so we can receive reimbursement from TDOT.
And this updates the amount of federal funding in the project, because it had been at 10 million, it's now at 22.4 million.
Right, but that doesn't
So this
answer
does
why
two
we
things.
slowed down.
No, this is changing the date's not slowing us down. We're moving as fast as we possibly can on the project.
But why do we need, they still won't understand why we need the extra time.
We're putting a date out there for reimbursement purposes with TDOT. It's our agreement there. We're trying to get the project done as soon as we can. So as soon as we get through condemnation and get final design approval from TDOT, we get that notice to proceed for construction, we're going to bid. And we hope it's well in front of this date.
Before.
Yes,
Yes,
we're hoping to be well in front of
So
that.
that doesn't stop the work.
It does not slow us down, changing the date.
Thank you for saying that. Okay, thanks. Yeah, I get that, but I just wanted you to explain it a little bit more because people will be listening and they're gonna hear this. So, thanks.
Everybody good? Item 3, Resolution 2021-92, a resolution to rescind resolution establishing Liberty Hills Pond as a regional stormwater detention facility. I'm going to invite Mr. Smith to go ahead and sit down, but staff, go ahead and...
So just real high level, at the end of the day, with these type of situations, we're really looking for you all to set and establish the policy for how we implement it. We get requests from HOAs all the time, and we want that to be clear and predictable. So when they come to us and request something, we know if it's our maintenance or their maintenance and can give them direction. Now, anytime an HOA or someone wants to come in front of the board, we automatically bring that request forward to y'all. So how did we get here today? Just looking back at it, we met with the HOA multiple times, probably 5 or 6 times, and it really started off as a study to see if we could increase the size of the pond to alleviate downstream flooding. What was determined was the pond was not big enough to do that. We would need a significant amount of more property real estate to be able to have a regional facility that has an impact downstream. We ultimately received a letter from the HOA, asking us to, one, perform health checks on the stream on a yearly basis, dredge that pond, and review the dredging of that pond every 5 to 6 years, install trash containment system, replace and maintain the aeration system, restore and treat the water quality, and restock the pond on a yearly basis, and reinforce the edges of the pond. And what we have consistently said is, we don't typically go out and aesthetically maintain what we consider to be private ponds. If it was a regional pond or a city pond, it would be different. We would do that, or look to do that and budget to do that. And so I'm not exactly sure what they're wanting, that we've not received a request to do some type of a stream project. And where I'm going with that is through all the studies that we did. They ultimately came back and said, the best solution here is to remove the outlet structure, replace or modify the culvert system, and essentially it'll have no impact upstream or downstream. It'll actually improve both by removing the pond that's in line, is what CEC came forward with. Now, we never did get direction from them or a request to move forward with that stream project, and that would be a different discussion and a different interpretation as to how we could partner or look to partner to do that. The request has simply been for the city to come in and maintain the aesthetics of a private pond. And again, the policy is your decision on how we proceed with these. We just have to be careful of how we implement it and how we treat all the different HOAs in the surrounding areas equally. The other thing we looked at was, do we think this is really truly regional? If this was a regional pond, upstream we would have waived detention requirements. We look back at Andover, has their own detention system. Cheswick Farms has their own detention system. Centennial Business Park, which is like the CVS, the retail, the car wash, they have their own detention system. It's underground, so you can't see it. Centennial High School, they have their own detention system. McEwen Place, the Whole Foods, they all have their own detention system. Spring Creek, the Drury Hotel, has their own detention system. Yes, their pond takes a very large tributary area. Yes, this pond is going to continue to fill up with sediment, and if we took maintenance of that or wanted to take maintenance of these type of ponds, we were going to consistently have to go out there and dredge these ponds. And it wouldn't just be this, it would start falling into, other ponds would fall into that category. Again, you all provide us to that direction on how you want to proceed with it, but we did not feel, based on our current policy, that was the appropriate thing for us to be doing. So really we're looking for your direction on that, and I'm not even sure if them as an HOA board are know which direction they want to go. And I don't want to speak for them, so I'll allow them to go through his presentation.
Any questions for Paul before I ask Mark? Go ahead, Alderman Peterson.
Again, my question is, how is this not regional? Because water comes from all of those places. I just went out there today and looked in Cheswick. What they have, they might have a little bitty retention or something, but they have these huge ditches that are cement ditches that are, I don't know how wide and everything, that are all in Andover, all just coming down, going to Liberty.
Yeah, so, I mean, generally speaking, yes, it is taking a huge tributary area. It's an inline pond, so it's a stream. And generally speaking, and we did not study specifically their contribution to the detention versus the contribution from everybody else. What I do know is the surrounding area, all the development has their own detention system. And typically when a developer builds this, they're going to bypass the flow that's coming from off-site. So if you have 400 acres coming off-site, that flow automatically gets bypassed through their outlet structure, and they're only required to detain what their development is adding. And that's very typical in every single development. I have never seen in my years of experience a developer willingly say, I want to over-detain and treat or detain additional above and beyond what I'm required, because it starts to take up real estate and developable property. So again, we don't have a study of their subdivision, of the impact it has on it. What I can say is it is regionally impacted by sediment, but we're not seeing a regional benefit of storage and water quality intent with it. You know, I know we dredged this back in 2005, 2006. I don't know why we would do that without there being a true technical study showing a regional benefit, but that decision was made for whatever reason. And again, we just don't have a study that shows that this is providing that regional benefit, which is one of the reasons why CEC ultimately recommended, you know, removing the pond and changing that with a culvert, which really isn't our decision to make, given the fact that it's a private pond. It's the HOA's decision to move
Go ahead,
forward.
Vice Mayor.
Well, I know Ms. Ann still has the floor. I just want to comment on what you said. I live in Andover, and I have for 22 years next month. We have no underground retention. We have what Ms. Ann's describing, that it's kind of like those movies you see in California where there's all these concrete things that gather. It's not that elaborate. But in the middle of the subdivision, there are grassy areas that go down into a concrete situation that flows there, I would only assume, unless it goes into that private lake that was behind she passed away, where Andover Court is now. There's a crazy lake back there, but we don't have underground retention.
It's above ground in Andover is what the plans show. Now, I've not inspected the facility. I did find it on the construction drawings that show a detention area.
Well, it may be like where it gathers, but then it goes.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying? There's a literal
Yeah.
concrete, like, pathway that traverses
Yeah.
through the subdivision.
And I'm basing that off of my review of the construction drawings.
I know, I'm just saying, in debate of that,
Yeah.
because I live there, we don't have any kind of reservoir ponds. We have a pathway that goes somewhere else.
Vice Mayor, not Vice Mayor, Alderman Berger, I'm sorry.
I don't know if there's any further questions right now, but I'd like to hear the presentation, so I'm sure going to have a lot more questions. So, I don't know if it was-
Did you have questions on?
Well, isn't what they described, isn't that the definition of a detention pond? It's not supposed to hold the water. It's just supposed to slow the flow down and keep it for a while, isn't it? So what they've described is a detention area, is it not? When,
Mine doesn't gather water, it just moves it.
It gathers it in an area,
Yeah.
it holds it, and then slowly
yeah,
releases it. Is
slow-
the intent.
it slows it down.
Whether they're functioning or not, I can't say that we've inspected those anytime recently. But it's something that the stormwater funds pay for. Recently, we've had enough staff to start that. And so what we do now with stormwater funding is we try to inspect them once every 5 years and then work with the property owners to make repairs.
Go ahead, Alderman Hanson.
So, in an attempt to understand this more, I made a call to FEMA and did some research on my own. And I noticed that CEC said that Dry Branch at Moores Lane is a retention center. And FEMA's description of a retention center is something with a downward flow that comes from topography that dives in and creates the water flow coming down either from rain or other resources that ends up in another larger pool. So here's your Dry Branch, but you're telling us that Lake Jackson was not. But this actually flows directly through Lake Jackson, all the way down into Spencer Creek and another tributary. So I really question CEC's ability to say that Liberty Hills is not, because they said that Lake Jackson was not, but according to FEMA, FEMA would call this a regional detention center, according to FEMA.
CEC did not study Jackson Lake. Staff looked at it and said, we're making an assumption that it's not serving as a regional benefit, because it would take a study to truly show what that regional benefit is. We know Dry Branch is because we built it, we studied it, and it was built for a specific intent and purpose. We don't have that information on Liberty Hills. We don't have that information on Jackson Lake. What we do have on Liberty Hills is that to serve, what CEC is saying is to have a regional impact, it would have to be significantly larger to serve that 400, roughly 400 acres that drains to it.
Okay. If you'll share that with staff so they can put that in the record, please. Okay, we're going to welcome Mark Smith. Mark has passed out a handout for you. I've asked him to keep his comments to somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes, which I plan on enforcing. Mark, welcome.
Yes, sir. Hey, everybody. First off, I'd like to admire Gabrielle's tape job on her diagram. I could not do that myself, but oh yeah, it is. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, Mr. Mayor, Board of Aldermen, good evening. My name is Mark Smith. I'm the Liberty Hills HOA president. I'd like to thank you for giving me time to be the voice for the residents of Liberty Hills. We're all here. I sent out some information this weekend. I'd like to hit the high points before your consideration of passing Resolution 2021-92. So I'll walk you through these handouts page by page. So let's flip to page 2. This is why we're here. This is the current state of Liberty Hills Pond in the summer months. So we cannot control the algae growth as it's become a health hazard and a nose and eyesore. And the question is, why is this algae growing? It's because the pond is no longer deep enough to prevent this overgrowth. So we treat with the chemicals bi-monthly, as we always have since 2006 out of HOA funds. And we have a boat go around to try to push down the algae and agitate the water, but the fact remains that this needs to be dredged or removed to fix this problem permanently and not just Band-Aid it. So let's flip to page 3. You good? We're also here because we have an HOA agreement that maintains all aspects of the pond with the city. So while we've been maintaining the pond in terms of replacing fountains, mowing, landscaping, and this chemical treatment, the city has this agreement in place since 2004 for the major maintenance, as the pond was accepted as a regional stormwater facility in 2004 by city engineering. When we came to the city in late 2019 and early 2020 and asked for this maintenance, the city declined, and we were met with the view that the pond is no longer the city's problem because there's not enough benefit. As you can see in the green highlighted text, the agreement does not say it may act. It says it acts as a regional stormwater retention facility. It also says regular dredging and maintenance and repair is in the public interest because it remains, quote, an important component of the citywide stormwater management system. So let's flip to page 4. On slide 4, you can say it may need cleaning, construction, repair, and ongoing maintenance to continue to function properly for the purposes for which it was created. It goes on to say the retention pond meets city standards as a functional regional stormwater facility. As a result of this agreement, as Paul said, the pond was dredged by the city in 2006. But if the pond in 2004 met city engineering standards, city staff in 2022 has made it clear that it doesn't meet those standards today. So we still don't know what has changed between the standards of 2004 and 2022. But what we do know is how city engineering views the pond from a city standpoint. So let's take a look at slide 5 and review the 2-part test developed by the head of Franklin's MS4 program. So a top engineer for the city's stormwater management developed a 2-part test to understand all the ponds across the city in relation to Liberty Hills. So this 2-part test, which now in 22, a pond must pass to be considered a true regional stormwater facility. Part 1 says that the pond must clearly provide a regional benefit, but this seems very subjective, as you'll see why in a minute. And then the first part is mostly around if the pond appears to provide regional benefit outside of a single development, i.e., was the pond originally designed to detain treat runoff from other development sites? Part 2 is mostly around, does the city own the pond, or is there a plat assigning maintenance? So let's flip to the next slide. Let's take a look at how this test was applied to Liberty Hills. So both parts we failed. The second test, sure, the city does not own the pond. They have an easement in place to maintain it, and we have that resolution from 2004. The first test, however, we were marked as failed. There is a note that says, facility provides no regional water quality or quantity benefit, and in parentheses, based on a CEC study. So I don't know which study that is, because if we look at the next page, there's a map of the tributary area. So this is the drainage map. I replicated it from the CEC study. This one right here, I didn't print it out to save some trees. But does this pond serve more than one development site? So if you consider Cheswick Farms, Andover Park, Centennial High School, Vieira Cool Springs, and the commercial space up towards McEwen as not part of Liberty Hills, I think it's safe to say that it serves more than one development site. Does the pond reduce or prevent any other developments from building stormwater facilities? Well, we talked about underground. We don't know if that's true or not, but I don't see any retention ponds except for directly to the north. There's like a dry pond area, which we'll get into here. So let's flip to page 8. This is another slide from the presentation 2 weeks ago. It's an acreage reference from which the city considers a good range for tributary area for stormwater management. And I highlighted 40 to 300 acres. Liberty Hills Pond has 414 acres of tributary area going into it, as noted by the CEC study. So these are not measurements that I made. Let's go to page 9. So in terms of the problem of the pond being filled with sediment, we're only contributing 60 acres in Liberty Hills. So if you look at the diagram, I measured the acres on Google Maps. Cheswick Farms contributes 60 acres. Andover Park contributes 40 acres. Centennial is 55. And then there's an entire development segment to the east of I-65 that's about 70 acres. So they are doing some development there. I don't know if they adjusted the elevation there. But Vieira Cool Springs does 30 acres. So we contribute about 15% of the drainage acreage to this 414 acre territory. So let's flip to the next one. This is a diagram that I built to lay out the structure of the pond and the acreage. And the point of this is we wanted to find a rule of thumb for how much retention pond you would need for a particular drainage area. We applied this logic because when we asked the question of who built the pond this way, no one seems to know. All the documents are gone. There's no records. So we found a stormwater management design guide made in 2014 by the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. And what it states about the space required for a typical wet pond is, quote, will normally be at least 1 to 3% of its contributing drainage area, depending on impervious cover and pond geometry. So when you run some rough estimates on the area that Liberty Hills contributes, you need a pond surface that's about 1/2 acre. Our pond surface is about 4.8 acres, including the dry forebay area, because it does go up to Liberty Hills Drive and Liberty Pike. So I also wanted to mention that CEC studied that when the pond functions in this manner and in maximum capacity, the pond almost functions across Liberty Hills into Cheswick Farms area. So it goes under that culvert and then it fills up that dry pond to the north of that drains directly into our pond. So let's go ahead and flip to the next one. So given that the pond is clearly serving a tributary area of more than one development site, how can you look at this and say that it just fails that first test? I'm not sure. So now I know the pond has to provide clear benefit to the region as required by the test, but the question is how much benefit? Is that subjective? Because the city had to hire CEC for expertise to address the downstream flooding and also look at the flood map and update it. But we have those two reports and the city says it provides no benefit. So we need to take another look at this. Maybe we should say it doesn't provide as much benefit as we thought in 2004 when standards were different. If that's the case, please help us fix it, get out of it, or remove it, but please just don't leave it with us with this resolution. So let's flip to the next one. There's this looming question that I have is, how is the HOA to collect funds from Cheswick, Andover, Vieira, Centennial, and all of the 41 businesses to do this major maintenance? The city wants us to subsidize the major maintenance needed on this pond with our HOA funds, but all along we've collected $600,000 since 2004 and continue to collect $32,000 a year from the stormwater fee. This number does not include the stormwater fee for commercial, which is calculated by the square footage of impervious material. This is just the residential fees. So now I know 80% of this money goes to the salary staff that work on stormwater, but to us, it almost appears that the city is collecting premiums and refuses to pay a claim we are making. So let's flip to page 13. So this is the new resolution that is being pushed. And we think this came about because we asked the city to uphold their agreement in 2004. So after a couple years of back and forth, this came up. This new resolution rescinds the 2004 resolution, stating that it's in the best interest of the city. Well, of course it is, because all of the costs will now be on the homeowners of Liberty Hills. Removing the stormwater designation just gives a clear line for the city to just walk away from the pond and its problems, sticking the bill to the homeowners. More so, the snippet you're looking at shows that the best option for the city is to remove the pond as identified by CEC. I don't see a reference of this. I have the actual report here. It says CEC recommends that the city not make modifications to the Liberty Hills Pond outlet structure and storage capacity. I don't know if they looked at installing a stream, but that's what they recommended about altering the pond. So let's flip to the next slide. So the question is, what do we do with the pond? Well, back in November of last year, the HOA met with city staff and asked about how we go about the official process to ask BOMA for assistance, ask for money or for something to be done. They suggested we engage with a few engineering firms and ask for a consultation. When we did that, we asked the engineering firms to create an estimate to look at the two options, dredge or remove. Back in 2006, dredging cost $194,000. The engineering firm would have to look at the 2022 costs, the permitting, and provide an official estimate so that we can provide to city staff, who can then give it to you for review to see if you should do it or not. Same goes for removing the pond. The city ballparked this at $1 million. However, there is an alternate option to have the state pay for it with removal, with credits for stream restoration projects. However, to look at the viability of this, the engineering firm would have to draw up a design, present it to the state and city and HOA, so there would be a cost to even knowing if this was an option. So if you flip to the next page there. So the question is, which option is right? Well, without paying for a pond feasibility study and deciding as a group, as a custodian of our HOA funds, I cannot justify spending $20,000 to $30,000 of the homeowner's money to know about the options and study the pond with a problem that we only contributed 15% to of our acreage. The city allowed the development to happen that connects directly to our pond. This is a city problem, and the city should help to solve it. So we need help funding the study. So if you flip to the second to last page, I can't tell you which option is right. That's going to take a room full of people and some studying, but I can tell you which option is not right. So these options include leaving the homeowners with a pond that was allowed to be built by the city and leave it for except emergency maintenance. Another one is telling the homeowners that stormwater regulations and ways of doing things have changed, so the city no longer has interest in the pond as a regional management facility. We can't ignore the problem, and we can't just pass laws to get out of the problem. And we can't push the entire cost of this, of keeping the pond safe and healthy and reasonable in appearance, on the Liberty Hills homeowners. And we can't just remove the stormwater designation. If we go to the last page, here is my ultimate ask, and I think this will help Paul understand what we're asking for. We're asking the Board of Aldermen to vote no on Resolution 2021-92, which rescinds our 2004 agreement, which has been in place for 18 years. We ask that you allow the HOA to partner with the city to find a long-term solution for the pond and to fund a study to have CEC or another engineering firm look at the pond in its entirety. And that includes looking at the cost of dredging, look at the cost of removing, or if it's even viable, and present those findings with their expert opinion on just how much value the pond really provides in stormwater retention, or if we can even remove it without making Ralston Creek worse than what it is. We believe abruptly removing our regional detention facility allocation is not the appropriate way to handle this issue. We had an agreement, we asked the city to uphold their end, and now the city wants to pass laws to exonerate themselves from holding their end of the agreement. We should not set this precedent for the city of Franklin, and we cannot leave the homeowners with this problem alone. So if the city wishes to exit the agreement, we should do it in a proper fashion. We should negotiate and leave the community whole, not with a looming major project on their hands. So that's all I have. Do you have any questions for me, or?
Okay, Board, you've heard the presentation, and who's got questions for staff or for Mark?
I would like to hear that last statement,
Yes, sir.
the very last statement that you made.
If the city wishes to exit the agreement?
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
what did you say? You said if the city wishes to exit the agreement, we should negotiate with you
Yeah.
on something or other that allows us to negotiate and be out of the agreement. Okay.
Yeah, and I was informed earlier today that engineering, if we were to just remove the pond, they would work with us. But my question is, what if we wanted to keep it? That's where the problem lies, because the view of engineering is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if we want to keep the pond looking nice, that's on us. But we can with chemicals to a certain point. At a certain point, it needs to just be straight up dredged to prevent that ridiculous algae overgrowth. And so that's where the rub is if we want to keep the pond, the city sees no value in having the pond there because the water just flows over it into Ralston Creek, and there's not enough retention for it to be a viable facility in 2022. But in 2004, it was. We don't have record of how that logic was done. So the ask here is that the city help us and everyone, a consultant, take a full look at this, not just Ralston Creek flooding, not just the floodplain, but what happens if you remove the pond and what exactly does that look like, so that I can go to the homeowners and say, should we work with the city to remove the pond, or should we start splitting the cost of dredging every 15 years or every 20 years? We need to understand all of that. But when we went to, get the pond dredged and asked the city to help to do that, then this resolution was pushed forward. So that's what I'm opposing.
So you don't know whether you want to maintain and keep the pond, or whether you want to drain the pond and resurface that area out there?
We don't have enough information to make that decision as homeowners, or, in my opinion, city engineering doesn't either, but I'm only a homeowner, I'm not an engineer.
Does it matter if the pond's open to the public? And the reason that I say that, I mean, and I don't want to get into this a great deal, but I will. I have the same situation. I mean, I have a detention pond sitting right in front of my house. And we, as far as I know, the HOA has maintained that. We spray for algae. We put the algae-eating fish in there. I mean, we drain it. We have pumps that sit there. We have aerators there that we maintain. We have people that come in, and I actually, maybe that may not need to be published. We have people that come in that trap the animals in there that are the muskrats and stuff, and carry them someplace. I don't think they do anything with them other than carry them down Duck River, but we maintain it, and that's what we do. So I'm just asking, what is the difference between mine and yours?
Yeah, so we talked with our pond maintenance about that, and we said, well, what we're doing right now, our maintenance, everything you just described, we did as well since 2006. We didn't stop doing that and let it get to this point. It got to this point because it's filling in with sediment from the full tributary area. And so when we said, how do we get a more permanent solution to just dumping these chemicals in here, doesn't seem to be working, they said the pond needs to be dredged. Because it's so shallow that the sunlight is letting that algae grow
Okay.
to a ridiculous
Could very well
level.
be.
So
I don't know how deep the one that's in front of me is.
Yeah.
But
But,
I do know this, we've had
Second.
buildings around that are now draining into that,
yeah.
that are not to the extent that you're having what you're having there. But I know we have the drainages in there, the areas there that are new development.
Alderman Berger, and then I've got Alderman Baggett.
Okay, I have a few things to say. Clyde, I think Willow Springs, rather, is internal to your subdivision. There is a little difference here, where you have an opportunity because you're not internal. this is right on the street. It's accessible to the public, so we might want to talk about, can the city take this over? Could we turn this into a park? We might want to look at that, if you all are willing to do that. I think that's an option. I have a number of notes. I just want to quickly go through them very fast. I'm not going to belabor it, but developer put this pond in, he made it a lot bigger than it normally should have been made. So talking to people through the ages before us, they said they felt that the pond was being built larger to help downstream. I don't have the documentation on that, so I can't bring that. The gentleman who built that subdivision is in his 80s, and but there are some people I've talked to, and that there was a concern that this was going to be built larger, and because of the impact. Built ponds like this that are built are more regional ponds when they're built so large, and you quoted the acreage, 1 acre, and it's really 4.8 acres. We did, you cited our cleanup and the things that we did. We know things aren't going to get better. That's obviously, we know that. We have a lot of sediment coming into your pond. You're impacted greatly from outside your area. The elephant in the room, in my perspective sometimes, is that HOAs, and this is probably across the city, that HOAs are not able to financially or logistically maintain the ponds around town, or in our town. And there's a dire need for work and maintenance on these ponds. I think we have some issues here. We have an agreement with you that doesn't exist with the other ponds. And HOAs are not equipped to work, they're not equipped to financially work or financially maintain these retention ponds. I think going forward, we have to really make sure that our erosion controls are really airtight with these developments, and how we were going to sustain these ponds going forward. So the city, in partnership with some of the HOAs, can maintain some of these ponds, I think. But for Liberty Hills, I honestly think we ought to look at this to look at a public area. I'm not an engineer, but after researching this for a number of years, this is not my first rodeo with this pond, and but looking at it in greater detail, Paul, you and I have talked about it for years. Everything I've read, everything I've seen, every detail I've seen, everything I've gone through tells me that this is regionally impacted, and it answers the answers of the benefit that we argue about all the time. Is it a regional benefit? Is not easily answered. Now, tonight, I heard, Paul, you mentioned, and this is true, that you said you're without a study that shows a regional benefit. We're without a study that shows a regional benefit. We're sort of guessing at that. We don't really know. That's what you said. And the other thing is, staff made an assumption, okay? And you have to, because you have to use your expertise to make an assumption and give an opinion. I don't quarrel with that. But we don't have the information on Jackson Lake or Liberty Hills. And so where does that leave us? So I look at this and I say, okay, what would I come up with? And talking to you, Mark, and talking to you, Paul, looking at all the residents, I have a responsibility to the city, fiduciary responsibility. I have a job to do here. I have a job to do with the constituents and with the people that I answer to and the needs that you bring forward. So I have a foot in both camps. So what do? I take a look at this and I think we do need more information. Clyde brought up a great point, and about, do we have enough information to make this? Well, I think that we need to partner with hiring CEC, if that's the case, and study and report, for them to study and report in detail, number one, the ramifications, that's the pros and cons of removing the Liberty Hill Pond. In addition, the details from the engineering firm should include estimates and cost of the work that would be required to remove the pond, and include what that physically looks like for your subdivision as well, because I'm sure you'll want to know that. Also, how does that, the ramifications, how does that truly give us the information you need to say, does it really impact anybody downstream? The firm should also address keeping the pond in place and give a reasonable, there's two things, taking the pond out, the other thing, keeping the pond, and how they can reasonably forecast the work and the cost involved in order to restore the pond to a healthy condition and provide a long-term maintenance and fee schedule of what that looks like for your HOA, and do we need to partner with an HOA to do that? So I'm going to ask the city and the HOA to partner with each other, maybe do something like an 80-20 split for a study here. Upon receiving a report, we need a study. We need something to tell us, do they remove this pond? Should they remove the pond? Is it detrimental to remove the pond? Or should you keep the pond, or can you keep the pond? And if you decide to keep the pond, what's the ramifications for you all financially? And so upon receiving a report or a study, this matter then should be brought back to the board for our review, our discussion, and a decision going forward whether to remove the pond, keep the pond in place, or maybe other scenarios that they might bring us from an engineering and cost standpoint that maybe we don't know. So, I would also ask, if the pond remains, that we honestly look with you as a homeowner association and the city, that we discuss what does it look like to turn the entire pond area over to the city ownership and make a park out of that area. That would incur costs for the city long-term. Maybe we also partner with the HOA to do some work there long-term. But I suggest if we encompass the work on the pond in the park, that it coincides. If we ever went in that direction, it would coincide with the work on the road work that we're about to do in the years to come on Liberty with the roundabouts. So that we could coincide that work. So bottom line, I'm asking that we do some kind of study, some kind of information, so Paul, you can say with certainty, it's not just an opinion, it's a study, we've done it, we agree with it, we've looked at it, we CEC, and we present that with HOA and the city, and we can come to a reasonable conclusion, and a conclusion from an engineering standpoint, because we want to make sure whatever we decide here and whatever you decide is not detrimental to other people outside your area as well, because it's going to be real important.
Alderman Baggett.
Let me just make sure I get this clear. Has there been a study by a licensed professional engineering firm that has determined the regional benefit of this pond?
When they looked at it, they determined it would have to be significantly larger to have a regional benefit downstream of it. Now, the reason we did the study was the downstream HOA was bringing us complaints, erosion complaints, erosion complaints, erosion complaints. Can anything be done? And so we went into this with the hope and the goal to identify how we could make this function better as a regional facility. And they came back and said, you can't afford it. There's not enough land, enough acreage to make this have a regional impact downstream of it. They did, in fact, with 100% confidence, determine that we could remove the outlet structure, we could modify the culverts, and put a stream in. We don't need to study that. 100% confident that
That's
can be
been
done.
studied.
And have no impact upstream or downstream. It'll actually benefit both upstream and downstream.
So, and they would come to that conclusion because what I learned tonight, which is that there are detention facilities, for lack of a better word, in these other areas in the compelling diagram that showed all the acreage. So simply because the water flows from 450 acres through the pond doesn't necessarily mean, or is not inherent, that means it's providing a regional benefit simply because regional water flows through the pond. Is that right?
That's correct.
So, because when rain falls, naturally it's going to go through from everywhere, go through ponds and rivers all over to get to, it's just going to flow to the streams, right, and through ponds. But the objective, or the standard is it providing a benefit over and above if the pond wasn't there, right? So that's true. We also have this agreement in 2004, which is very valid. and is something that we've got to really take into consideration. The sediment, I mean, ponds, I've been around ponds a long time. Ponds fill with sediment. Doesn't matter where they are, they're going to fill with sediment. In the middle of the country, they fill with sediment. I mean, it's kind of the thing with ponds. And you have to, no matter where you are, they fill with sediment. It's kind of nature. At the same time, I go back to we had this agreement. And I think I agree with Alderman Berger is that we've got this situation, and those can be, that can all be true, what we just talked about. But also, it's incumbent upon us, because of the agreement in 2004, to solve this as a city, or help solve. And I think the city's willing to do that. I think we have to also draw a line where is it in the public interest, what's in the public interest and what's in the interest of the homeowners association, and to have an amenity. Because I do disagree a little bit. We have many HOAs in town that have ponds that they maintain, as Alderman Barnhill mentioned, and do so, and I guess they dredge every so often and so forth. I know the financial impact that has on the HOA, and that weighs heavily on the way I think. So we have this agreement with Liberty Hills. We don't have these agreements with the others. So to say that we've got to figure out a pond solution for the whole city with HOA because they can't handle it, they can because they're doing it now. I just think we have to look at this from an objective standpoint, and the HOA has to decide, and we don't have the information in front of us for them to be able to decide what they want to do. They don't know if they want to take on maintaining a pond long term because they don't know what the cost is to do that now and long term. We need to come up, like Alderman Barnhill said, and negotiate how to get out of this if there really is no regional benefit, which
Your second.
they say, the engineers who are paid to do this say that. And if we need another engineering study, if the HOA disagrees with it, get another engineering study. And that's fine too. We have to at some point rely on some engineer to tell us that what is and is not true. But I'm empathetic, and I do believe we don't need to stick the HOA with certain costs simply by getting out of this agreement at the time when it feels like we need to dredge the pond because of history. So I think I echo Alderman Berger's point of view, which is we need to study and agree with the HOA that this study to figure out what to do, whether we partner with you all to pay in that. I don't feel like passing this tonight makes much sense to me until we know more.
I've got Alderman Brown, and then I've got Alderman Potts.
Very quick question and very quick comment. This is the only pond the city has an agreement with. Is that right?
If you read a formal agreement that went this way, negotiated, I would say that to my knowledge, yes. The way we interpret the agreement is really to provide, like we do everywhere else in the city, emergency maintenance. A pipe clogs, we go unclog it. The outlet structure clogs up, we go unclog it.
Look, I'm not an engineer. I don't know about inflows and outflows and regional detention and all that. For me, this just still comes back to our HOA has a pond. When we moved there, we knew we were going to have to take care of it. We've been budgeting for it. The fees are in there. We hold back funds to be able to dredge later. I think having a criteria for evaluating whether or not ponds are HOA owned or not, I think we should have that. I think we should have probably a little tighter one than even the two-part test that we've got. I think so we can really feel like we're making objective decisions versus subjective decisions. But this one still comes back to me. We've got an agreement here, and I think for the most part, we didn't make that agreement. We're walking into the agreement, but I think that deserves special handling. Whether that ultimately is negotiated differently or not, that can be something that we look at. But to just walk away from it, to me, just doesn't feel like Franklin, and I feel like it's just not. That's not what we want to do. These are residents and homeowners, and I feel like it starts and stops with the agreement. So.
The gray area for us is that agreement doesn't specify the level of maintenance, and that's where, again, your policy sets how we respond when other HOAs come forward to us.
Yep.
And so we look at how we treat it now, and again, it's usually just emergency maintenance. We get a lot of requests on stream bank failures. Well, we don't maintain stream banks. We maintain pipes, culverts, clogs, and that's generally what they're doing.
Alderman Potts, and then I have the vice mayor after that, and then Alderman Peterson after that.
Yes, sir, and recognizing time, Mark, thank you, number one, for putting this together, and thanks to the residents for Liberty Hills being here tonight. As I emailed with you, as the HOA president for Maplewood, I had to deal with this issue before, all right? So I understand the details of this. My question, just cutting straight to it in the interest of time, is has the board discussed what percentage they would be willing to pay for a study?
I would have to go back and discuss it with the board, but we were thinking our contribution area is 60 acres, so that's 15%
Okay.
of the 414, so that's where we're at. It's 15%, which is close to Bev's 20%. So,
Okay. Thank you.
yeah.
Vice mayor?
Thank you, Jason, because I was like, somebody's got to thank poor Mark, who's like, much like us, this is not our full-time job. So,
It's not mine
thanks
either.
for the 30-minute YouTube video last night. I did watch it all. We appreciate all of our HOA presidents who really stand in the gap for us, so thank you for that. I think we're splitting hairs here, and if this literally came from us, it's pretty clear what our intentions were. And nowhere was there a vote to rescind this intention. So I feel like tonight, I mean, I cannot, however the vote is, yay or nay, basically I can't support us rescinding. I was like, how is that written? Because sometimes our vote, yeah. I do think we need to kind of have an idea of what we're looking at, and as far as how it permeates through everybody else's ponds, I don't know. This is the one where it's literally written to your benefit. And as far as it being public, Bev, I understand where you're going with that. There's nowhere to park, there's nowhere to access it. I mean, a walk-on access only is a little bit crazy for parkland, but I do feel like it's, and when we say regional, typically in this room, we're talking a little bit bigger of a region. So I do think that the areas around Liberty Hills contribute to this, and I think about when we do have heavy rains, that water has to go somewhere and that pond will fill up. And I have seen it, and it's not just from rain, it's from rushing water, and I've seen it come close to the roadway. So to me, that says water's coming from somewhere other than those homeowners. So I think we've got some work to do here, and I will vote to support whatever we were talking about.
Go ahead, Alderman Peterson.
Well, the idea of perhaps working together to figure out what is possible, and also the expenses for that, I think that we certainly should start by saying, let us look at a study and pay together on the study, and then see what that shows up, because if you drive out there, you see, as I say, those huge ditches that are concrete on both sides, that's not retaining anything. It's just giving a really big, wide,
Pathway.
pathway that's increasing the flow. Speeding it up. I'll say that. But as I say, if we can get a start by trying to work together to look and see the way things are and the money involved.
Go ahead, Mr. Stuckey.
Yeah, I maybe try to summarize where I think we are and maybe where we go forward. And I will say, I appreciate very much the presentation and Mark's perspective on this. I think the ask is kind of different than where we started. So I think that warrants some more discussion, and I want to clarify what the study is, not study to study. I mean, we know certain things, so what would really be meaningful? And I want to gather that from both the neighborhood and from our engineering team. Because, what we were responding to a year or so ago was a pretty specific demand and level of service. I don't mean demand in a bad way, I'm just saying a delineation of what you wanted done by us, by the city, by the community. And I think that's where the questions were raised, and that's part of why we wanted to give some context 2 weeks ago about, hey, you got 16 others that are kind of like this same thing. Yeah, there may not be this 16-year-old resolution that is just a resolution, but it's a resolution. So how do we frame this? And I think what I see here is, okay, let's think through what we know now, what we see happening. Let's better define the function of this facility and talk through with the neighborhood what the expectation might be and what their role might be, what the city's role could be, both in terms of what it is now and what a longer-term program might look like. So it's really let's get back together and talk through what the study would be, what it would give us, and how it might help us shape that. For you, the thought is, yes, there's this resolution. How do we differentiate this from these other 15 so that we're not creating a new service level expectation across the community when we've got a certain defined role for that stormwater fund fee and what it does and doesn't do? So that's the other part that we have to think about is what are we creating in terms of what the service level expectation is. And if you want to revisit that, I'm fine to do that, but we got to think through the financial ramifications beyond this. So it is both the very micro of the Liberty Hills situation and working through this, and I appreciate the context that has been provided tonight with that, but also giving you the chance to say, okay, how is this going to work throughout the rest of the community and those other areas that we highlighted for you that are not exactly the same, but have some similar characteristics. So I think tonight the move would be for giving us that direction to go and describe what a study might look like and to engage the neighborhood in looking at both the study, but also what the expectations or options might be moving forward, and bring that back around to you.
I think what needs to be in the study, you're right, what needs to be in the study. And Paul, may I ask, you said when CDC found there was no detrimental impact downstream. Can we get that in writing? I mean, if we can get that in writing from them,
It's in writing in the report.
well, again, I want them to state that they would stand up to that,
I can do that.
because I think that would be something we wouldn't have to repeat.
Yeah, and let's have a little more dialogue with the neighborhood about what questions are we asking CEC or
Right.
whoever to answer. I start with CEC because they've done the initial work, but maybe
Right.
somebody else is, I don't know.
Maybe we should have somebody else so you have a
Yes,
comparison.
maybe.
So
I think so.
I don't know.
I think so.
So let us look at what that might look like, and together maybe an outline of questions and topics that we would expect to be covered, and then look at what that scope of work is
Maybe they could
and
take
what
a
that
look at
cost
that.
is and how that fits.
Yeah.
So,
If you don't mind, I'd like to move on.
Could I say one
final
thing?
comment.
And that is the CEC,
Just
it seemed to me whenever I read all the things about that, they were really looking at Ralston Creek. They really were not looking at, I mean, they did this incidentally, but they were really
You wanna say
looking at
something?
Ralston Creek.
yeah.
The-
Do-
I'm going to let Mark say something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
30 seconds.
Our main goal for tonight is this resolution cannot pass because it's saying
Yeah.
that if the city wants to do any maintenance, which includes dredging, what if we want to keep the pond and split the costs or take it over in the future, that they will remove the pond. And this resolution gives a clear outline and a path to that, that if we want to fix the problem that's being created over the last 18 years until now, and then the city helps with that, and then we take it over later and keep our pond, there's no path for that.
Yeah.
So we need to keep the paths open and not pass this.
Yeah, yeah.
30 seconds.
My comment would be that what Eric covered on a lot of that, and the fact that this has to be universally studied as far as the amount of money is concerned in that fund itself. And I will smile and say that if we do this resolution and don't undo it, we've entered into 16 other resolutions, okay? So smile, because I've sat here too long to know that the next person coming through that door back there with the next pond issue is gonna want the same thing.
But they have no agreement.
Okay, we're-
No.
That doesn't make any difference.
No,
You
it's only
treat
one.
every person the same as what we've just got through.
No, we
I've heard
don't.
it down
We
through
never
that you
do.
treat all 85,000 people in the city, you treat the same. So if they've got an issue, this other person's got an issue, they're to be treated the same.
Well, they get.
Item 4, Resolution 2022-04, a resolution acknowledging the letter of agreement between the Tennessee Main Street Program and the Downtown Franklin Association. Is anybody here from Downtown Franklin?
This is
Okay.
something we do annually to just recognize our support for their representation in the community and the involvement in the Main Street program, and they just need an acknowledgement from us saying, hey, we're on board and we support the program.
I would like to suggest that somebody from the Downtown Franklin Association should come and acknowledge what they're doing. I've met with the new person, but the board doesn't know who this person is, I don't think, so. Heidi.
It's Heidi. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So item 5 is procurement award to 3C's Lawn Care of Madison, Tennessee. Total estimated annual amount of $334,980 for mowing and related contract services for certain city parks and certain other city-owned properties for a term award of the Parks Department. Any questions about that one? Go ahead, Alderman
So
Hanson.
we don't have a staff or equipment to do this ourselves, or is it less expensive to farm it out?
We do have staff that does maintain a great number of acres within our park system. We've had some issues retaining staff over the years, so we decided to contract this out because it's more reliable. Because there have been some ongoing issues with hiring and retaining people, we have added some additional acres, and that's why you'll see a cost increase here. So this is a little more efficient way of doing it.
We do a great deal of maintenance, but we balance what we contract out with what we provide with our team, and we put our team where it's most effective, and that's sort of a balancing act we go through on a pretty regular basis to look at where does it make sense for our resources versus a contracted service.
Yeah, we would ramp up in the growing months, excuse me, in hiring part-time people, and people don't want part-time jobs anymore, and we had a really big challenge in hiring those type of staff, so that's, yes.
Okay, item 6 is City of Franklin Contract 2021-0344 Parkland Impact Fee Agreement for 1414 West Main Street between the City of Franklin and West Main Investments LLC.
They're paying the fee.
That's good. Item 7 is City of Franklin Contract 2021-0343 Parkland Impact Fee Agreement for Woodwick Stone between the City of Franklin and Floyd Beach. They're paying the fee?
Paying the fee.
I like that.
Nailed it.
How about City of Franklin Contract 2021-0306 between the City of Franklin and Franklin Housing Authority for receipt of Community Development Block Grant funds to reimburse $25,000 for expenses related to public facilities renovation. Question about that? Item 9, good report, Mr. Girth.
Just stick around.
I've seen him stick around before. Next is City of Franklin Contract 2021-0322 between the City of Franklin and Daughters of the King for the receipt of Community Development Block Grant coronavirus funds to reimburse them up to $16,198.58 for expenses incurred to prevent, prepare for, or respond to the coronavirus. Sounds good. Item 10 is City of Franklin Contract 2021-0323 between the City of Franklin and Franklin Hair Academy for the receipt of Community Development Block Grant coronavirus funds to reimburse them for up to $35,000 for expenses incurred to prevent, prepare for, respond to, or recover from the coronavirus pandemic. Vice Mayor?
So this one just struck me as so odd. And so I did dialogue with Eric last night through text. I wasn't arguing, but
I wasn't either.
and I've never been to the Franklin Hair Academy. I'm sure they do a great service for our community and training people to provide this service. But and I know Eric expressed that they met all the qualifications. and he likened it to a Columbia State, and I'm not going to put words in your
Yeah,
mouth, and
yeah.
I can't read my text, but what is interesting to me about this, and I really am not quite sure how I feel about it, is most everybody that we've given COVID relief money to, and I understand this is more CDBG money, has been nonprofits. If you look at the agenda item previously, Daughters of the King, Tracy Mack and her wonderful group of ladies who help pitch in a gap that we have in this community. This one seems just very strange to me. And so I'm not saying I'm against it, but I need publicly
Yeah.
a little bit more explanation. I know that they were allowed to apply,
Right.
and apply they did. And it's just, help me here, because when there was a correlation against Columbia State and a medical training program, the end result of that is saving lives for the entire community. This is aesthetics and fixing people's hair and nails and faces to make them feel more beautiful. It's apples and oranges.
So
I understand it's
yeah.
jobs. I understand that, but it's a departure from anybody else who's received it. Give me that.
Well, yeah, there's a variety of options and these are federal dollars, CDBG, Community Development Block Grant dollars targeted for COVID-related impacts. And there's a pretty wide range of what that can be. And you're right, to this point, and the city has specifically chosen to make these dollars really available to outside entities, and they've been nonprofits to this point. And Columbia State did do an arrangement with us. One of the categories is the opportunity to provide job training or retraining targeted to populations that were specifically impacted by COVID. And in this case, this entity, and it is a for-profit business, but they do provide job training, has targeted low-income households, residents of Williamson County to receive this training. So you look at it as, it's a career opportunity. Exactly. So it's targeted to local residents and that qualify as from a low-income household. And that's similar to what Columbia State did with the medical assistant certification program. We approved 3 cohorts of 10 students each to go through and get that certification, and then they take a test to get the certification. And so, but it's similar. It's through a community college, but it's similar in that it provides job skills that hopefully help build a career for folks that have been impacted maybe above and beyond what others in our community have been through the pandemic. So that's the thinking behind it. They did approach us with it. It does qualify. It does seem to qualify, and that it has this benefit to low and moderate income folks that have been impacted, and it does provide for a job training or retraining component.
If it hit me odd,
Yeah.
surely other people are gonna be like, what?
Yeah.
So I needed that explanation, and it does make more sense. But it just makes me curious what's coming down the
It is a
pipe
little
next.
different.
How much money do we have left in this fund?
I don't know what the balance is now, but the total was about $500,000, I think. So we've had a number of partners throughout the community.
Yes.
And it's sort of been a rolling thing, and some have held off because there are other avenues for funding that are available that may be a better approach for them that could be eligible for this, but they're coming back around as there are other needs or opportunities for serving the community. So
Thank
we
you for
continue
your-
to look for those partnerships.
Thank you for your thoughtful
Alderman Begg.
explanation.
So I'm not familiar with this type of the CDBG, but there are, I would guess, because it is for-profit, there are some reporting requirements and some there's documentation that's required to show that that's what the funds were used for, I would guess.
Right, yeah. We've got a report, and we have an annual review from Housing and Urban Development
Okay.
for the
That's
use
right.
of dollars, and this would not be an exception. It would be its own category for the regular review that we receive.
That's a good question. So the CDBG program that has been around for decades really aligns with the Department of Housing and Urban Development and provides funding to provide and promote housing for lower and low income families. The CDBG COVID, CV, is the mechanism for the federal government to get the money out through the CARES Act. And it's not limited to lower income families. It's to respond to citizens that have been impacted by COVID. The reporting is onus on each entity, whether it's related to housing or it's these entities that are taking advantage of it, should the federal government be audited. We have certain guidelines, as Eric mentioned, that we get audited on to make sure that we're collecting the the information needed to satisfy those audits.
So the federal government chose a couple years ago to use the community development platform as a one of many options to get some federal aid out for COVID relief or COVID response. And in using the CDBG platform, it is still to focus on low and moderate income benefit.
Item 11, this is going to get exciting too. Discussion and guidance for prohibiting extended length vehicles from parking in city parking structures and for authorizing the city's parking control officer to take additional measures related to vehicles whose owners have multiple outstanding unpaid parking citations.
More interested in backing into the garage.
Well, thank you. And again, we're not making a decision on either of these two items this evening, but just looking for some guidance, and I want to make sure that we leave enough time for Michael and Eric to talk about the capital investment plan. But the first item, and I'm going to separate them, relates to parking in the two parking structures. And what we've noticed, an increase in the length of vehicles, and Michael's going to share just a handful of pictures of these extended length vehicles.
That looks like a really short. I don't think that picture's right.
Yeah. I wish we could, I think some people would like to do that when they're driving through the garage. But the point is, I believe.
Is that Alderman Baggett's truck? I got dibs on the parking spot, because I'm not going to fit.
And yeah, for people that drive in parking structures, some people do get a little bit more stressed out or cautious when they're when they're in spaces trying to back out. And I would like to hope that most of us have been next to a longer vehicle or SUV, and you're trying to back out when cars are coming and you can't see until you're out in the lane. And there's a picture that Michael shows there. And as people try to navigate by each other, it's been an increasing concern for some of our employees. And Adam Mosier and our team, we looked at how we might be able to mitigate this situation, because there is plenty of parking in the downtown, and if we can eliminate these vehicles from our parking structure, perhaps people will feel more comfortable in moving through, and it'll be more efficient experience, pleasurable experience for everybody. So Michael, if you could pull up what we're recommending, is to, we'd have to come back with an ordinance amendment to our municipal code, but to paint some overhang lines and sign the parking structures accordingly, that if somebody parked a longer vehicle that extended beyond those lines, and you can see how they'd be delineated, that they would be subject to a municipal parking citation. And that's really, if you want us to pursue that further, that's the purpose of this discussion, or we can just live with what we have.
Alderman Brown, I had him first.
Just on this one, the question is, so we have specific spots for compact vehicles. Is there a way within this garage to find specific spots for oversized vehicles where we're in Middle Tennessee. There's going to be long trucks. Is there a way to designate in spots or roof spots or whatever that would at least give some option, and when they're full, they're full?
Like much like the compact spaces, people with regular-sized vehicles park in those, and you usually see them at the end of each of the aisles. We have thought about allowing the larger vehicles to park at the ends that are opposite of the turning lanes. We could do that as to try to see if people will respect those parking spaces, but we don't issue citations to a standardized vehicle parking in a compact space, et cetera.
Alderman Berger, then I've got Alderman Baggett, then I've got the Vice
I-
Mayor, then
I
I've
just-
got Alderman Peterson.
Take a number, right? I just dittoed that. That was my thinking too. But the other problem is going to be, Matt, is that, because I'm thinking through this and I'm thinking, okay, when you drive in, how do we alert them? So how do they miss a sign or whatever? Maybe at the end, or maybe we say, go to the rooftop. And we have spaces only on the rooftop for these people. And we don't put them inside because, as you said, that's a problem, backing up, and it's more contained, it's more difficult. On the rooftop, at least you can see it's daylight and it's easier. So maybe we talk about that, but we don't totally prohibit them. So I don't like prohibiting, it's Tennessee, and I think you're gonna have this. So we have to learn how to accommodate them and also how to get the message across so when they go into the garage, they know. So I don't know how we do that.
Alderman Baggett.
Very respectfully, I am thankful that people are concerned and want a pleasurable experience in the parking garage. The top 3 cars in Tennessee: Ford F-150, number 2, Chevy Silverado, number 3, Ram 1500. I've just looked it up according to Edmunds, and we've got a GMC guy and a Ram guy here. But I will say, I understand has anyone not been able to get out of the deck that we know of because of these trucks? I mean, have there been wrecks? And I think it's a little much. It's a little much, but I understand the issue. There's a lot of trucks in town.
If I may.
Suburbans.
And again, we're just wanting some
Understood.
feedback, and the first thing I'd like to say is that we do have limited staff here because of the
Understood.
situation, but Adam, he drives a long vehicle, so we've had this conversation, and we can certainly look at that and appreciate the guidance, because, and for your sake, just so you can maybe put more context to it, the driving lane in our garage here on 2nd Avenue is about 16 inches narrower than on the 4th Avenue garage. So you can, now you're going to probably go into the garages when you're in there and say, oh, there's one of those long trucks and I got to wait for somebody to pass. But we'll look at that and bring it back for the sake of time.
I've still got Vice Mayor and Alderman Peterson. And
I really miss Dana, so in the spirit of Dana, seriously. This is absolutely ridiculous. We're going to discriminate people based on the car they drive or the truck they drive, that you can only park in our garage if you have the right vehicle. Come on. I will also say that most people in Williamson County, myself not included, have cars that have cameras that ding at them when they back up if somebody's even remotely in the area. I do not. I can't back up at night in the dark because I can't see what's behind me. I cannot support this. Dana McClendon would be going on for many more minutes than I just did, but ridiculous.
Alderman Peterson.
If we could pull up photograph 8 or vehicle 8 or something like that, there's a pickup sticking out and everything, but there's just a regular sedan there that's also way out.
Oh, I see your point.
Yeah. See, wait.
wheels are almost to the line as well.
Yeah, but wait, I don't think that one's, is that the number 8?
Yes, it is.
Mine
Let's see.
looks,
Look right there. Look right there.
Okay, yeah. They're definitely out beyond where you would expect them to be.
If there are better spaces where it's more ideal for them to park, I think it's great, but this kind of ticketing thing and a line, I mean, if we identify spaces that are better for larger vehicles, that's one thing. I think maybe just identifying the spaces that are better for
Okay.
large.
Alderman Barnhill, I'm going to let you have the last word before he talks about one other component.
I am the ram driver.
You're the what driver?
Ram.
A monster truck.
Let the record show that Alderman Barnhill drives a Ram.
Even that, even mine's not that long. But you'll look at that right there, you've got an extended cab onto the 4 doors that you've got on there. So you've got, that's probably the longest truck without something else on it that you could buy. That's a good example right there.
Now, you had another
I
component
did.
of this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I did, and
Yeah.
Lieutenant Prather had brought this to my attention, and I offered to help bring it to you, and by default, I'm here.
Good to know who
But-
to reach out to.
But, you know, it does, it resonated when he brought it up, because it was more out of the frustration of people, and it's only a few that it happens to, and I shared some of those numbers that Jessica Davy had shared and from our traffic control or parking operations. But I mentioned to Eric that I had an aunt and the wife of a good friend that were both parking control officers. And it's a tough job. They even have a TV show about that career path. And in talking to the last 2 parking control officers we have, there was a frustration because they would be citing the same vehicles and that weren't paying their violation. So Lieutenant Prather asked, well, we don't have tools to maybe immobilize the vehicle, the boot perhaps. And I said, well, let's talk to the alderman to see if we want to put the tool in our municipal code. And our law department, Sean and her team did look around Tennessee to see if that was permissible, and Chattanooga and Memphis, we're told, have ordinances that may allow our parking control team to take action. Again, I want to emphasize that the problem isn't pervasive, but in retaining help and making them feel valued. And granted, some people receive a citation and will pay the fine, even though we provide 2 warnings annually before we start citing. But there are those that just
We
rather
didn't
not
focus
pay.
on that part of the item, and I apologize. That I have no problem with.
Oh,
So for habitual offenders, they need to get their
The
attention.
other piece we talked a little more about that isn't included in the memo is also using some collection services related to folks that have become habitual. And it is literally, it's a handful or a little more that just blow it off. And that may be another solution too, that just gets at that specific group, a small group of individuals that have just decided to thumb their nose at the citations and to say, if they get me, they get me. Well, if we at least put some effort behind collection and just saying, hey, this is real and you ought to pay it, and it might drive some better compliance from that small group of exception too. So that's another companion we could do along with exploring this option.
Alderman Brown, then Alderman Hanson.
I know I have a very romanced view of Franklin. I have to be honest, if I was driving down Main Street and saw a car with a boot on it, I would think I was someplace else. I can't imagine that. However, we got 21 people. The trigger point on that was for 4+ citations. You got 21 that are even close to that. That seems like a very manageable number to have conversations with or to address on an individual basis. I do think we should up our game on it. They should pay the money they owe. We should curb the behavior. I just can't imagine driving down Main Street and seeing a car with a boot on it.
Hey, I got an idea.
You're limited in what you can charge.
Based on,
I'm getting the no shake. I got it, okay.
go ahead, Alderman Hanson.
Comparing us to Chattanooga or Memphis, I think, is the whole reason all of us serve as aldermen, to make sure we don't become a Chattanooga or a Memphis. So I'm with Alderman Brown. I can't stomach the boot that is so
Yeah.
urban. That's not us. But I do like the idea of putting pressure on them by publicizing their name and their fines in the newspaper and on
paper.
social
There you
media,
go.
because that would
Thank
shame
you.
them into paying their bills.
I agree.
And it is a public notice.
You mentioned,
Yeah.
you mentioned
It is.
collections agents,
Yeah.
collections would be a little less,
Would that cost money?
not for
Yeah.
us. No, it doesn't cost us money.
The
They
collection
take it out of-
company?
No, it's the company, the collections company takes it a fee, so it's not costing the city any money, and actually would take time off the officer probably from following up.
It's a way to put some follow-up on it.
Just to follow up on Alderman Hanson's comment, and she mentioned Memphis, there was a medical student, not me, who, in the medical center, parking was very, very tight. Each time he got a ticket, he threw it in his glove box, until one day an officer came to class and arrested him in the class and hauled him out, so social
bad
pressure.
idea.
So we need
Yeah.
to keep moving. You got another
Well, I
quick-
was just going to say, it's exactly what I'd say. Let's publicize their name. Do we send these people letters?
I believe we do, yes,
We need to double check that.
we do.
And we need to call them, we need to send a letter, and we need to see how we're notifying them. Yeah, and I don't know if that's legal,
I think the collection is,
but also let's publicize their names. Let's make a list. We can do that, I don't think that's against the law.
Shame game.
Yeah,
Item 12,
I agree.
update on 2022 to 2031
get-
capital investment plan projects and financing. Thanks for the humor tonight,
Yeah.
Mr. Yard.
it was very entertaining.
Some of our other colleagues, they
All right, so we want to take you through sort of a check-in of where the capital investment program is. This has come up in a couple different contexts over several meetings, and wanted to step back and look at the program as a whole, the approved projects, where we are with those. We provided a series of updates by project category before some of you were on the board, but within the last year. We also provided an update in the fall related to the overall financial model and capacity and where we stood in the context of looking at some options around the City Hall project. 2 weeks ago, we also touched on that. But we wanted to take you through where we are with the 35 approved projects in terms of the project life cycle, if you will, from concept to completion, and give you a sense of where we are and what your options might be if you want to reexamine or reconsider priorities or other priorities along with it, and check in with you about where you want to go in terms of how this plays out. We are committed to delivering projects, but we want to make sure that the projects that you're focused in on, and giving you a sense of where we are with the approved projects at this point, and get your feedback on where you want to go moving forward is really our purpose tonight. We really don't want to delve into specific projects. We might give you an example or two just to kind of frame some different issues, but if you want to do some additional work specifically on projects, we'd be glad to set that up as well. I know we've talked about a session related to City Hall. Maybe we want to blend that together or do a couple different dedicated sessions related to either capital investment or specific projects or categories of projects. So Michael's going to take you through, show you some different perspectives on where we are, especially as it relates to financial capacity, and then we'll get your feedback from there.
Thank you, Eric. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. My name is Michael Walters-Young, your Budget and Strategic Innovation Manager. For those of you who were on the board or not on the board in the audience, a lot of this is going to look familiar because it's really an update to our October presentation on this topic. But with the new information coming in terms of a cost for City Hall, we wanted to be able to update the totals and kind of give you a different slicing, if you will, of where we are. There are two items in your packet this evening regarding, there's this presentation, and then there is a scorecard, which we're calling it, a one-page scorecard that shows all 35 projects, where we are, how much the budget is, how much we spent to date, and estimated completion times. And we'll walk you through that and be able to show that for you. So as I said, we will review the revenues, existing, future, and the change since 2019. A slightly different slicing of the projects, similar, and they match the scorecard. And then Eric will take you into a closing summary of next steps and where we want to go. So as a reminder, we have been doing capital planning for the majority of the last decade here in Franklin in 10-year increments. We did a 5-year plan, 2014 through 18, and then in 2017 we did sort of a 10-year window in examining available revenues best we could, as well as available projects best we could. That was updated in 2019 through 2028, and now we are in 2022 through 2031. The plan is that every 2 or 2.5 years at most, we come back to you, we give you updates, and that plan gets refreshed and never stops. That we always are looking at least 10 years to be able to see how much money we think we're going to have, and then how much money and where we're going to go spend that money, those projects, and give you, the board, the chance to review them, see where we are, and add or delete any as you see fit. So of the existing plan, if you will, dating back to where we are, looking at cash on hand resources. As of the end of 2021, we had roughly $75 million in cash from the available sources as you see here. General fund, road impact fund, city facilities, county facilities, stormwater, hotel, motel, parkland. And then a small amount listed of water on this that is a piece of a capital project attributable, or several that are water improvements that would be directly from the water fund. This is not inclusive, let me repeat this, this is not inclusive of water and wastewater projects in and of themselves. This is everything other. In October, we updated the revenue model and showed you that we are forecasting roughly $322 million in new resources over the next 10 years. You heard some comment during previous board meetings and previous finance committee meetings of the 64-36 split. We have worked to try to get more of these projects funded with cash and less with debt. And you see the relative amount of those resources listed in some smaller details on the sort of center of your slide. When we did this 2.5 years ago, that was more of a 55-45 split, and we've been trying to work it more, again, so that we use one-time cash resources on capital and limit the city's additional amount of debt we take on. Now, we are taking on more debt, and this forecast would have us take on more debt than we looked at doing in 2019. However, overall, as a percentage of the total financing, it is less than it was 2.5 years ago.
And 5 years ago, this was about 50-50. So that's the progress we've made in terms of that balance, and that's one of the LMCC from the sales tax capacity component that has helped us really project out a lesser share in the debt category.
And
Could
yes, sir.
I understand the ratios from 55 years ago, but 5 years ago, what was the debt? What is the debt now?
In terms of new debt being issued, proposed as a financing source, and we'll go back to 2019 because I can't quote you what the 2017 number was off my head. This was $95 million in 2019, and we're proposing an additional $20 to $115 million in this plan.
But of course, we've added 2 years.
Yeah.
Could I get you to say, for the people who haven't been on here for a while, talk about that over 45% of the fund balance, at this, because may not be aware that we have a very good rule and strong rule about how much we have to have just at the fund balance. And then if it goes over that, a percentage goes over that, then that's when you can take it out to use for some other reason.
Thank you, Alderman. So the City of Franklin has we have a series of financial policies. And you can go into the Finance Department's website, you can access them all and find out when they've been updated. In this case, we do have a fund balance policy for the general fund. The first 33%, that's our minimum amount of fund balance we want to keep, and we split that 33% up into a series of categories to cover emergency situations, to cover insurance overages. Again, we're self-insured, so we want to make sure we have a reserve available to cover other post-employment benefit overages, et cetera. There's a
General.
general. That amount is updated every year depending upon what fund balance actually is. So it's a percentage distribution, so therefore the dollar amounts go up as fund balance changes.
And it matches your budget.
Correct.
As your budget is
The revenues.
larger, your target is higher.
From 33 to 45% is a supplemental reserve. That is also available for literally supplemental needs as they may be seen fit, but targeted for operational concerns. If revenue losses, if you go back to the Great Recession in 2008 and 9. Anything over 45% you have voted is available free and clear for capital funding. So in this case, that $29.1 million you see at the top of the chart, that is the over 45% amount that would be available to you to spend on cash funding of capital projects. So let us look then, roughly $400 million, or $397 million is available. Where has this changed from where we were 2.5 years ago? There's two ways of slicing this. The first is, as I showed you back in October, revenues have gone up significantly. The amount of financing that we've been able to target has gone up roughly 31%. With the new costs of City Hall added in, total project costs have gone up 33.8%. That is a balance of roughly $19.98 million. If you go back to our City Hall presentation, we advised you to keep at least $20 million, which is not allocated. And lo and behold, we're very, very, very close to that amount. Another way of looking at it is if we look at the available cash we have on hand versus what we have spent, that's roughly $9.9 million. And the new projects versus how much they would cost is roughly $10 million. It's, again, adds up to that same $19.98 million. The major changes since October are the fact that we have combined the City Hall and downtown parking projects into one. They were listed separately, and we've added $41.9 million to the total estimated cost of those combined projects. Taking a look at this in a different way, the expenses total roughly $377 million over the 10 years. Now, there are 35 approved projects, which have been approved via Resolution 2019-68. Totaling that amount, and we are dividing them into really 4 categories: completed projects, under construction projects, right-of-way, projects which are actively seeking and purchasing rights-of-way to build them, and then the rest which are in some major state of design, or minor state of design as the case may be. The other thing I want to point out is that you will note on the scorecard, and I'll turn to that now, there is a BOMA Top 10 listing at the far left, and there are 5 stars. We went through a process, staff as well as the board, doing a ranking of those projects 3 years ago, and staff gave you recommendations of 1, 2, 3, and 4 stars based upon a series of criterion. Ultimately, the ones that the board voted as their top 10 got 5 stars because they're the top priority and because, well, you're the board. It's your list. It's your set of projects. So we have put that on those top 10 projects. Going down the scorecard, we have the name of the project. We have the category, whether it's stormwater, parks and recreation, general services, or transportation. We have the revised budget of those projects. So that takes into account that 33.8% degree of expense increase. What we have spent through December of 2021 on each of these projects, and then the estimated completion dates. To put it graphically, we have sort of a heat map, if you will, from design to right-of-way to bidding to construction to being complete.
Before you move off of that, go back. Just want to make an observation. This was affirming, and I think this will make Paul feel pretty good. When you look at this is a 10-year capital project plan. When you look at 2019 as that benchmark of when these group of projects were approved in that resolution, 35 projects there. We've got 7 complete as of right now. You have 3 more that'll be complete by the end of 2022. So that's 10 projects of the 35 completed in the first 3 years of your 10-year plan window. That's pretty good on track. Obviously, some are more complicated than others and have a longer lead time, but that's a pretty good track record of delivering on projects, and we've really worked hard on our operations side to ramp up, both in terms of staffing and capacity, to oversee and move projects through, and we continue to look at how we do that in different aspects of delivering projects, whether it's right-of-way acquisition or construction inspection, those kind of things. How can we do better on that and deliver projects? So project delivery is a really important component to us, and we've put more focus on that in the last 5 years, or 5-6 years, I would say. And I think this makes me feel like we're making progress there. We're not totally where we want to be, but the seeing the number of projects on that right-hand side is encouraging, and we're going to continue to focus on that delivery aspect. So thank you for letting me make a quick editorial comment.
So, again, we've broken these up into 4 major blocks. So the bright Crayola green green are completed projects. As I'm learning way too much from my toddler from Paw Patrol Green Means Go. Things you never think you'll spend time doing. But there are 7 projects which are fully completed. Most expensive and biggest among them, Fire Station 7. We did a series of sanitation improvements to the sanitation facility at Century Court. The 100 block Battle Avenue drainage improvements, McEwen Drive exchange modifications, the Maplewood Stormwater Project, the Fifth Avenue parking lot, and we repaved the road circle around the eastern flank facility. Actively under construction, $42.9 million of projects include Franklin Road, our major road resurfacing project, the ball fields, which we are partnering with the Franklin Special School District, the 96 West Trail, and the Army Corps of Engineers home raising project. If you look at this, it's important to point out that all expenses shown are the gross amounts, not necessarily the city's share. That's reflected in the revenue. So you heard tonight about McEwen 4, that we're, now that's up to $22.4 million. That total project cost is $34.057. So all of these amounts being shown are gross amounts. The home raising project, our share is roughly, if all homes participate, north of $850,000 of that nearly $5 million amount. In various states of right-of-way acquisition include McEwen Phase 4, Bicentennial Park, Jordan Road, Pratt Lane Bridge Replacement, and the West Main Bridge Street widening.
Margaret's Bridge.
Miss Margaret's Bridge. And then the next 2 slides show you projects in various stages of design. Now you'll note there's a yellow line underneath McEwen Phase 5. This is what we are calling sort of a obligation line. Insofar as the new City Hall is a project which is actively underway. Southeast Park is a mixture of design and active construction. Long Lane, Paytonsville Road, which was the #1 overall project when you last ranked CIP projects. And McEwen Phase 5, we are contractually obligated with the city of Brentwood. When construction begins on that, we are on the hook for our share.
And they're funding actually a little over half of that cost from our previous agreement.
So the total cost is 19.
Correct.
Total cost is estimated at 19.6. Our share is north of 9, but under 10. Brentwood takes the majority. Small, but it's the majority of the cost. So the rest of these projects going down, regardless of your ranking, regardless of what have you, are in various stages of design. All the way down to a small neighborhood pocket park in Thompson's Alley at $220,000. To look at it in a different way and to summarize it, there is roughly, by our estimation, $269 million of resources that are already obligated. That really can't be reprioritized, that can't be respent on other purposes should you choose to want to go and do that. The first 3 are relatively self-explanatory. We've already fully expensed the project, we're actively expensing the project, or we're going out purchasing land to then go and build the project. The 4 projects I just listed are much larger projects. They will take longer amounts of time, but we're either contractually obligated or there are commitments to do so, which leaves a balance. of roughly $108 million that are either not started or very early in the design process. And at this point, I'll turn it over to the city administrator.
So I guess what we want to get your feedback on is what your comfort level is. We've kind of given you a sense of how far committed we are to certain projects, and that they're really, as Michael said, of that, there's about 108 million that might be in play, but even within that, there are some that I would say really probably aren't. When you look at things like Liberty Park, where we're using parkland money that's designated for that district, and that's really where completing that master plan is really the best and almost only option for the use of those dollars. And that's really what those folks paid parkland money for, is to complete that kind of project. So while it could be, I don't know where else you'd go with those dollars. Just as an example, you've got the linkage between Chestnut Bend neighborhood and into Harlansdale Farm. Technically, it's not bid yet, but we've got significant state dollars, and we've got a project that's really on the cusp of bidding and going forward, so it's going to pretty quickly slide into that, above that line group. So if you go through that 108 probably shrinks a pretty good amount. But we want to assess that with you, understand what your desire is to, they've been called approved projects, but not all of them are fully committed in terms of where we are in the timeline. So if you want to reconsider some of those, or say what about, or what other project options are there, we are ready to do that for you. That could also lead to a capacity discussion for you for longer term planning. If your thought is, well, I see that we've got X amount right now. Staff, do you want to look at options that could allow us to do some additional projects in a new 10-year window, or 10 years and beyond? What could that look like? And that could be something as we look at some of our financial plan and our 5-year outlook that is sort of a companion with our budget document. What are some ideas that could help you generate additional capacity, if you're comfortable with us doing that as a companion? And this is probably a broader discussion. We can go into projects. We're open to how you want to consider it, both in terms of projects that have been identified to date and whatever else might be out there, as well as kind of an assessment about capacity beyond the 10-year window. What could that look like? So I'll stop there and let you give us more direction and how you want to proceed.
Alderman Brown, then I'll get Alderman Carter.
First of all, Michael, thank God for you. So I guess I have two big questions, and we're getting ready to go do this mobile work session, and we're going to see some projects, and I think there's going to be some opportunity for us to get some better understanding. So I think to talk about specific projects, I think absolutely we're going to want to do that, especially some of us that are joining sort of new and understanding it. Doesn't mean that it changes prioritization, but I think we just need to have that context. So I do think that would be a great discussion to have it, maybe after these mobile tours. My two questions for you. So the first one is, and I'm just going to give you both of them, and you can go. You mentioned wastewater is not in here. Obviously, the current plant, we've got future stuff. Where does that go? Why is that not in here? I know we do approve increases and stuff. So the first question is just, how does wastewater fit into this? That's the first question. Second question is, I watched your budget presentation, which was great. One of the things that you talked about is we are going to come out of this phase. We're estimating with a great deal of inflation, but we are going to come out of this. I think you said very well, we will tend to be the last domino to fall when all that happens. I pay attention. And so my bigger question about the whole thing is, you've been very conservative. I've noted your conservativeness and all this stuff. Are we being as conservative as we really need to be, knowing that we are not going to be riding this much longer? It is going to come, and it's going to come in the next 5 years in the middle of some pretty big stuff. And how are we handicapping ourselves on that? That's my bigger question.
So the first question is simple to answer. The water and wastewater projects are contained within the Water Management Fund. Yeah. They have their own.
And there's something coming on that, let me tell you. We're going to be talking you through both updates of impact fee structure and then the projects that are in that longer-term capital timeline. So there's something coming on that through the balance of this year where we'll be looking at that. And we've got decisions that we need to make in the next year or so related to the southeast plant and the property that's been set aside for that and how we proceed with that, what that looks like. Because that has implications in terms of both the utility, but also the longer-term growth plan in the community, because the infrastructure is aligned with ultimately having a second plant in that area, or you don't maybe grow that area the way it's anticipated. So there is more, there'll be a specific kind of chain of workshops on that or work sessions on that that build some background knowledge for everybody on where the impact fees are, how that ties into funding those broader investments, and then where we are in funding that component. So that's coming. That's a preview of coming attractions. On the other component, I mean, that's why we try to look multiple years out and see. I think we try to be appropriately conservative, hit the right balance of what we think we can expect, but not hamstringing ourselves too much. The recent past has been more challenging. The acceleration we saw in sales tax was beyond what we would have projected, and the board would have laughed at us if we'd projected what we've experienced in the last 18 months. You said, "Are you crazy?" So I don't know what to tell you on that, except for to say we try to pay attention to what the indicators are. We have a general sense of how we track against the way the rest of the state goes and the projections they use. And so we try to not do it in a vacuum, but also it's a balancing act to make sure we're never overcommitting. So
The particular question, though, about this model, the added revenues in the general fund assume a rate of increase pre-inflation.
Yeah.
So the additional, there's two added components which greatly increase the amount of available revenues for the general fund, and that is our share of the 0.5% sales tax that was going to Williamson County through April of 2021, which we've been receiving thereafter, and the fact that the TIF district is rolling off. As a general policy for this for modeling practices, operations, and our 5-year long-range model in 5-year model in operations and our 10-year model for capital, we've split that amount 50-50. So the additional, and there's a small reasonable inflation factor of 2 to 3%, depending upon the traditional growth of the property tax levy in the case of the TIF district, or 2.5 to 3% of sales tax. Again, the traditional levels, not what we're seeing now. That's what's built into the revenues thus far. Everything else has a degree of conservatism in it, depending upon the financing source. For example, road impact assumes no net new revenues, because there's already obligations against that fund. We fund debt service out of that fund, and you must remember, or it's important to note, that certain amounts of that money can be set up in offset agreements so that they can be paid into the city, but then developers, if they do the improvement, have a choice to get the refund. So we've included no additional revenues in that particular fund going out the entire 10-year window. Sir.
Alderman Barnhill, and I've got Alderman Baggy. Thank you for the presentation. This has to be part of
Right.
the overall meeting that we need to have that we've discussed. I mean, just to go over this for 15 minutes does not do a $330-something million capital improvements budget justice, nor does it even cover water and wastewater. So that needs to be covered. Are you asking then if there's something in here that we want to reprioritize? Is that what you're looking for? Or are you looking for that at the meeting itself whenever we have that? Because I don't think we've set a date for that.
No, we haven't. This is a table setter. This is where we are and kind of how this looks and where you are in delivering projects. And really, our question is, how do you want to proceed? We look at these as approved projects, so we're focused on delivering them until you tell us not to. And if you want to add additional projects or you want to make trade-offs, we want to hear that, but we need to see how you want to proceed with what's been approved. We're saying there's kind of a line where you've really committed to them, so those are pretty much done, those are pretty much, you're so far committed, you wouldn't revisit those. But if you want to revisit something, we can facilitate that if you're comfortable with that, but want to look at what some of the other needs are and have us look at, how we do the split with the additional revenue. Is if we go away from 50/50, that could give you maybe some more capacity. We look at, how we did Invest Franklin a few years ago. We could look at some updated version of that dedicates some funding capacity to capital projects. There's a broader discussion of both funding and what projects you want to do. And so we're open to how you want to proceed with that, because there's the project delivery side, but there's also the project selection, and there's funding capacity that are all kind of work in tandem, if that makes sense.
Not to worry about something that hasn't occurred, but I think Alderman Brown hit it right on. I don't see how we're going to sustain what we're going through. I think what he said, within the next 5 years, 3 years, 5 years, or whatever, we will see a turnout. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we do anything any different from what we're doing right now. It may not happen. We may go 10 years without some significant turn down happening. It's unlikely that does occur. I would, and it's my, to be quite honest with you, there's one or two on there that I'd probably drop off. And it's not significant projects, don't misunderstand. But I'd go back through on this right here whenever we get ready to do that and show you one or two, 1, 2, 3, something like that, that will not affect $328 million.
Alderman Baggett, I think you've got the
30
last.
seconds. Yeah, so I'm getting the sense that you're showing this because you want us to see that we can afford a $75 million city hall in the capital project, that we have the capacity to do it. It's one of the main reasons, and still have our, spending cash debt. Do you normally publicly finance something that size over 8 or 9 years, which is what this timeline is?
Typically, the debt is a 20-year level debt service.
But this is
So-
showing it being paid for in.
No, it still would be tying to a
Into
20-year
the
debt
debt,
issue.
okay.
This
And
is just a 10-year
that's the
planning
debt
window.
piece of the 150.
Exactly.
Okay,
So
all right.
our general assumption is that we're issuing 20-year level debt service type of debt for general obligation.
Oh, we'll talk offline
Yeah.
so we don't. And you can
To be
educate.
clear, though, the $115 million of debt listed in this plan is a financing tool. None of this talks about how long and what the debt service costs are. That's what's repaid over 20 years,
Right.
or serviced.
Yeah.
7:20.
7:15.
Get out of here.